So good morning, everyone. Good to see all you familiar faces. This week, Linda and Nelly have, the theme is rituals, common and uncommon. And I'm going to keep up uh, that thread, speaking a bit from my own experience. So as I reflect on my years of experience with meditative practices, mostly in the Zen world, and now here in reflective meditation, I, as I look back on it, I see a trajectory of practice that's containing fewer and fewer rituals as I moved from one to another. At my first experience, I spent several months in residence at a Zen center on the East Coast. Everything in the Zendo, the meditation hall, was prescribed. The paint was a certain color, Navajo white, and the trim was a certain color. Every meditator, monk, or layperson had to wear the same colored light brown sitting robe. At my first retreat there, I was working in the kitchen during service, and the chanting hall was next door. It was so intense, it was raising the roof, and this caused an observation from an experienced meditator that the retreat was really already very deep. Soon after that, I joined a traditional Zen center in Los Angeles, led by a Japanese Roshi. The Zendo wasn't so finely finished, but the bells, drums, incense, ways of entering and leaving the Zendo, bowing, were all prescribed in minute detail. For example, I learned to be Chikido, the timekeeper. And in addition to ringing 3 bells at the beginning of sitting and 2 bells at the end, I would stand outside the Zendo, the meditation hall, before meditation, and at precisely 7 minutes until the beginning of meditation, I would start striking a hanging piece of wood, the han, we called it, with a mallet, with a wooden mallet, in precise timing. 7 hits at 9 seconds apart, and I had to count them in my head. Then into a crescendo of strikes, and then 5 hits at 7 seconds apart, and into a crescendo again. And finally, 3 hits at 5 seconds apart. This would alert meditators who were on the premises that it was time for meditation. And by hearing the spacing of the hits, one could tell how much time was left and how quickly they needed to get in and get seated. During retreat at this meditation center, you would eat meals seated in your cushions in the Zendo. And at a signal from the meal leader, unwrap and open your bowls. Another signal, you would start the meal chant. Then you would pick up your bowl and start eating. And when to pick up your bowls to clean them, and there was a signal to wrap them up. In other words, everything was done together in unison. When a sitting was over, every meditator would rise together, and on a signal from the timekeeper, bow to each other and do a left face. And again, on a signal from the timekeeper, walk together in single file around the Zendo. The emphasis was on collective experience, especially during a retreat. Once the retreat started, you left your personal experience, your personal life behind, and all the ritualistic actions were designed to encourage your sense of that everyone was doing the same thing together. This reinforced the idea that the minds of the meditators were no different from each other, and the ultimate experience was to experience with the same mind as the Roshi and the ancestral teachers. Through my wife, I became close to a new teacher who was studying with the Roshi there, Joko Beck. And when she moved to San Diego to open a new center, we followed. But Joko was concerned that people were making too much of the rituals and mistaking the rituals and the robes for real practice. At the new center, we kept some of the rituals, like how we sat and moved around in the zendo, a shorter, less elaborate service, but many things like robes and monks and the large hanging bells were dispensed with. She wanted us to be closer to our daily, everyday life. In fact, her most famous book was titled Everyday Zen. And then from there, I moved to this practice. And I have to say that when I first went to a retreat, this was in Spokane, and when Jason Siff was still the lead teacher, and walked into the meditation hall on the first morning, and people were sitting here and there, some with blankets, some with large pillows. My mind was literally blown away. What was going on here? People were just sitting around any place they choose, and not along the wall in a straight line, and on round black cushions, sitting up straight. Then later, during a Dharma talk, when Jason said something about what was important was our individual experience, I was further astonished. I was having trouble wrapping my mind around this approach where we were individual minds with individual experiences. And now I see that in this practice, we value our individual experience, bringing in our own personal stories, and that although there were certain guidelines, there was a lot of leeway in the way you approach things to find what works for you. So it seems, so why am I telling you this history? It seems that with regard to rituals, I can see this trajectory from a strict, elaborate set of actions that were meant to be performed together as perfectly as possible, and that that emphasized the collective common experience. And then to a less structured version of Zen, and now to a practice that emphasizes our individual experience with all its differences, with certain rituals that we have together, and many that we have created on our own in our own individual spaces. The differing rituals, I think, point to differing values. One emphasizing the mind, the consciousness that is common to all, sometimes called in the Zen world the Buddha mind, and the other emphasizing individual minds with differing experiences and learning about our own stories and how to develop our own ways of working with them. So I'll stop there. Thank you for listening this morning. We will go into meditation.